made the decision to bar the AP reporter from the Oval Office and the diplomatic reception room last night?
Well, first of all, let me just set the record straight. It is a privilege to cover this White House. It's a privilege to be the White House press secretary. And nobody has the right to go into the Oval Office and ask the President of the United States questions. That's an invitation that is given. And there are hundreds of outlets on this campus, many of you in this room who don't have the privilege of being part of that pool every single day and getting to ask the President questions. We reserve the right to decide who gets to go into the Oval Office, and you all have credentials to be here, including the Associated Press, who is in this briefing room today.
But isn't it retaliatory in nature is the argument, because the reason that the AP was barred, which they said was because they're not using the phrase Gulf of America, they're using Gulf of Mexico in line with their standards. And so the question here is this setting a precedent that this White House will retaliate against reporters who don't use the language that you guys believe reporters should use? And how does that align with the First Amendment commitment that you were just talking about?
I was very upfront in my briefing on day one that if we feel that there are lies being pushed by outlets in this room, we are going to hold those lies accountable.
Sure, Kaitlan. I have two questions for you, one on the flights, but first on the President's post overnight saying that the pardons that were issued by President Biden preemptively to members of the January 6th committee, that they're now null and void. Have attorneys here at the White House told President Trump that he has the legal authority to undo a pardon simply because it was signed by auto pen, as he said?
The president was begging the question that I think a lot of journalists in this room should be asking about whether or not the former president of the United States, who I think we can all finally agree was cognitively impaired. I know it took people some time to finally admit that, but we all know that to be true, as evidenced by his disastrous debate performance against President Trump during the campaign. I digress on that. But the president was raising the point that did the president even know about these pardons? Was his legal signature used without his consent or knowledge? And that's not just the president or me raising those questions, Kaitlan. According to the New York Post, there are Biden officials from the previous White House who raised those questions and wondered if the president was even consulted about his legally binding signature being signed onto documents. And so I think it's a question that everybody in this room should be looking into, because certainly that would propose perhaps criminal or illegal behavior if staff members were signing the President of the United States autograph without his consent.
Is on the record talking about issuing preemptive pardons to these people.
But was he aware of his signature being used on every single pardon? That's a question you should ask the Biden White House.
Is there any evidence on that he wasn't aware of it?
You're a reporter. You should find out.
One, were you aware of and did you personally approve the prison transfer for Ghislaine Maxwell that your Justice Department?
I didn't know about it at all. No, I read about it just like you did.
And do you believe that she is?
It's not a very uncommon thing.
Do you believe that she's credible to be listening to? Your Deputy Attorney General sat down with her recently.
Well, let me tell you, he's a very talented man. His name is Todd Blanche. He's a very legitimate person, very high. I just a very highly thought of person, respected by everybody. And I didn't talk to him about it, but I will tell you that whatever he asked would be totally appropriate, and it's not an uncommon thing to do that. And I think he probably wants to make sure that, people that should not be involved or aren't involved are not hurt by something that would be very, very unfortunate, very unfair to a lot of people.
You can't police people for being anti-Israel or pro-Israel. You can police people for violating the law. And we have seen some of that with some of these protests.
Okay, so you agree that people who break in and vandalize a building should be prosecuted?
Exactly.
Okay, I'm just checking because you did help raise money for people who did so on January 6th, which was, impeding an official proceeding, breaking into a building that they weren't allowed to be in, and vandalizing the Capitol.
Well, Kaitlan, I know that this is the obsession of the national media to talk about what happened 2 years ago, 3 years ago on January the 6th.
It's not an obsession. I'm just seeing if it's a double standard.
No, let me answer the question, Kaitlan. I mean, look, here's been my basic argument about January the 6th. If you beat up a cop, of course, you deserve to go to prison. If you violated the law, you should suffer the consequences. But there are people who protested on January the 6th who have had the complete weight of the Justice Department thrown at them when, at worst, they're accused of misdemeanors. Now, again, there are people who are accused of worse offenses, and that's a problem. But you can't have Black Lives Matter protesters who rioted and vandalized goes free when you have people who were actually peacefully protesting on January the 6th who have the book thrown at them. That's the double standard that I'm most worried about.
Yeah, I don't think there's an obsession with January 6th, but it is a legitimate question. And given what you just said there, and as Trump is getting closer to, as he's a presumptive Republican nominee, he has said he would pardon, it's considered a blanket pardon for everyone on January 6th. Are you saying that shouldn't happen? People who beat up cops should be excluded from that?
Well, I think what President Trump has said, and of course he can speak for himself, but I pay pretty close attention to what he says. And I think what the president has said is that people who have this double standard applied to them should be pardoned.
Donald Trump has always thrived on turning the tables, and in 2026, he has sharpened that instinct into a full-blown campaign of exposure. For years, critics, comedians, and political opponents have painted him as the punchline. But now, Trump and Melania are flipping the script, casting themselves as the ones doing the exposing. Their speeches, interviews, and even Melania's documentary have become platforms to call out what they see as hypocrisy, corruption, and incompetence among the very elites who mock them. I'm Olivia, and I'll be with you for the rest of the video. Don't forget to subscribe and stick around until the end. I promise you'll enjoy the show. Trump's central argument is simple. The establishment has always been corrupt, and he is the one willing to say it out loud. He points to Congress, where career politicians enrich themselves while pretending to serve the people. He exposes how lawmakers spend more time fundraising than legislating, how lobbyists write bills, and how donors dictate policy. He frames impeachment efforts against him as proof of their desperation, arguing that Washington insiders cannot stand a president who refuses to play by their rules. He has also turned his fire on the media. Trump accuses late-night hosts, journalists, and Hollywood figures of being part of a cultural elite that sneers at ordinary Americans. He exposes their double standards, comedians who mock him for gaffes but ignore scandals in their own industry, networks that obsess over his every word but downplay failures of the political class they favor. In his speeches, he often cites ratings declines and collapsing trust in mainstream outlets as evidence that the public sees through the facade. Melania, often portrayed as aloof or silent, has stepped into the spotlight with her documentary, Melania. While critics dismissed it as shallow, she insists it is an exposé of the pressures, manipulations, and betrayals she endured in Washington. She exposes the gossip-driven culture of the Capitol, where even first ladies are treated as pawns in political games. She highlights how the media twisted her fashion choices into narratives of vanity, while ignoring the charitable work she pursued. In interviews, she has gone further, accusing Washington insiders of trying to silence her voice because she refused to conform to their expectations of a political spouse. Together, the Trumps have focused on exposing what they call the failures of America's institutions. Trump points to the Supreme Court not as a neutral arbiter, but as a body constantly pressured by activists and politicians. He exposes how judges are lobbied, how cases are politicized, and how rulings are spun by the media to fit partisan narratives. He argues that his battles with the court reveal a deeper truth. The judiciary is not immune to the corruption that infects the rest of Washington. On the international stage, Trump has exposed what he sees as the hypocrisy of America's allies. He argues that NATO countries lecture the U.S. about democracy while failing to meet their own defense commitments. He exposes trade partners who demand access to American markets while protecting their own industries. His travel bans for the World Cup, though controversial, are framed as an exposure of global double standards, nations that criticize U.S. immigration policies while enforcing strict borders themselves. Economically, Trump has turned government shutdown threats into a weapon of exposure. He argues that the constant brinksmanship in Washington reveals how little politicians care about ordinary Americans. He exposes how budgets are stuffed with pork barrel projects, how debt ceilings are manipulated for political gain, and how fiscal responsibility is abandoned whenever it suits the establishment. His message is that he is the only one willing to reveal the rot in America's financial system. Immigration remains one of his sharpest tools of exposure. Trump accuses sanctuary cities of harboring criminals, exposing what he calls the dangers of prioritizing ideology over safety. He frames deportation raids not as cruelty, but as exposure of the failures of previous administrations to enforce the law. He argues that protests against his policies reveal the influence of activist groups funded by elites who benefit from cheap labor. Even in culture, Trump has made exposure his brand. He mocks the NFL for changing rules, exposing what he sees as the decline of American toughness. He ridicules Hollywood for celebrating films that flop, exposing the disconnect between critics and audiences. He even uses humor to expose what he calls the absurdity of woke culture, arguing that political correctness has become a weapon to silence dissent. Melania has joined him in this cultural critique. In her speeches, she exposes the fashion industry for exploiting women while pretending to empower them. She calls out social media for spreading toxicity under the guise of connection. She even exposes the hypocrisy of Washington's social circles, where charity galas are more about networking than helping those in need. Her message is that she has seen the elite up close, and she knows their smiles hide manipulation. The Trump strategy is clear. They're reframing themselves not as the exposed, but as the exposers. Every scandal, every criticism, every joke becomes evidence of a corrupt system desperate to silence them. They argue that their enemies are not just political opponents, but entrenched elites, terrified of losing control. This approach resonates with their supporters, who see exposure as truth-telling. When Trump rails against Congress, they see him revealing what they already suspected. When Melania speaks about the cruelty of Washington gossip, they see her exposing a culture they distrust. When Trump mocks the media, they see him exposing the bias they feel every day. Of course, critics argue that this is just deflection, that Trump and Melania are projecting their own flaws onto others. But the effectiveness of their strategy cannot be denied. By turning every attack into an opportunity to expose, they've shifted the narrative. Instead of being on the defensive, they present themselves as whistleblowers against a corrupt establishment. In 2026, Trump's presidency is defined not just by controversy, but by exposure. He exposes Congress, the media, the courts, the allies, the activists. Melania exposes Washington culture, the fashion industry, and the hypocrisy of elites. Together, they present themselves as the only ones willing to reveal the truth, no matter how uncomfortable. The irony is that while comedians and critics still mock them, the Trumps have embraced the role of exposers so fully that the laughter no longer stings. They argue that the jokes themselves expose the desperation of their enemies. And in a political climate where distrust of institutions runs deep, their message finds fertile ground. Donald Trump and Melania Trump have turned exposure into a weapon. Whether it's Congress, the media, Hollywood, or international allies, they claim to reveal corruption, hypocrisy, and incompetence at every turn. Their presidency is not just about governing, it's about exposing. And in 2026, that strategy has become their defining legacy.